Hey everyone, Brian Von VA here. Before we begin, if you have a story that may be pertinent to the actual topic of today's video, or just a story in general, make sure to leave a comment under the description. You can go down there and type away. We will read those anytime, any day. Now, today we're going to be exploring DMs. What are your red flags? And as we all know, a red flag usually means danger. Here's my homebrew spider humanoid race. Yeah, I've played tested it for a few years. It's not OP. Proceeds to have a 60-foot movement speed, natural poison bite attacks, and natural paralysis web action at level 1. Then they got annoyed when I have NPCs react terrified to their form. Look at that. To give context, this was for one of my first attempts at DMing, where I tried to run a LMOP at a local comic book shop. Players were people who happened to be in the shop at the time, and I didn't want to waste time going over everyone's sheets. I just wanted to play. Learned a lesson that day. Players who have a highly developed idea for a character that wouldn't be in genre for most games, and don't seem to be able to hear anything about the setting. They want to be a magical girl piloting a mecha, and then pop out with a different set of stats and abilities when said mecha runs out of hit points. You tell them the touchstones for the adventure are more like Wheel of Time or Lord of the Rings. Their eyes just glaze over. They continue to talk about the mecha. Yeah, I've had to deal with a lot of those people myself. That's when I get up and say, okay, either I'm going to find a new table or you're out. Players who act out their own hatred or prejudice in the game world. There's a difference between someone playing what is genuinely a fictional character and keeping it in-universe. Like playing a female drow who thinks men are inferior and behaves accordingly in character. I'll buy that because it makes sense. But as an example of what I'm talking about, back in high school, this kid that played with us turned out to be an anti-Semitic Nazi sympathizer. We didn't know this at first, so it wasn't terribly obvious until it was so obvious we couldn't believe how it got to that point. He hated elves. Okay, cool. He was hostile towards any elf and held that humans were the master race. Okay, master race, not the term I'd have used, but alright. Now, he wants to create a concentration camp called Auschwitz, so he can gather up every elf he can find and burn them alive. To say we all did a double take was an understatement. And he just doubled down, getting worse and worse about it until we finally told him to knock it off or leave the game. And his response was, I didn't take you all to be a bunch of you lovers. So yeah, that happened. Be mindful of other players' role-playing and make sure that it's actually, you know, role-playing and not an outlet for real-world hostility and hatred, which we definitely do not support. And that bastard deserved not only to be kicked out of the goddamn game, but thrown out of school too. Brick. Getting cagey and defensive when I ask questions, clarifying their intention. Oh, I love people like this. That red flag can mean a lot of things. In the better cases, it means they played with an adversarial DM and learned to keep everything close to their chest so the DM wouldn't ruin it. Still a red flag, but all it means is taking some extra time with them to deprogram them a bit. No, I'm not here to mess with you. I really am here to help facilitate your actions in a fair and plausible ways, etc. In other cases, there is never a group-healthy reason for wanting to keep secrets from the DM. Like, do they think if they don't tell me what their plan is, that after a few rounds when it becomes apparent both what their plan is and that it isn't going to work out, then I'm just going to sunk cost it and give it to them anyway via fiat? When you watch the player roll an 8, and then use their finger to turn it to a 16, and then look up at you and pretend like you didn't just clearly see them fudge their die roll. Players that don't pay attention when their character isn't actively talking or doing something. If they don't care about the other players or characters, they won't be a good teammate. Edit. A lot of y'all are taking this personally. A red flag is a potential warning sign, not, "Don't play with this person." I have a player at my table with ADHD, and while the attention span isn't there, they genuinely care about the other characters and are invested in the plot. Now, a warning sign here is if someone's playing on their phone or on their iPad or something else entirely, or even leaving the room. That kind of person who basically has their head up their ass, as the term would be, that's the one you gotta be looking out for, not the kid with ADHD or the person who literally can't sit still because they have Tourette's or some other muscle spasm type issue or nervous system issue. They're all fine. It's just the jackass who literally couldn't give a shit less is the red flagger that needs to go. People who can't respond on their own when you try to schedule the next session. I'm so sick of messaging everyone directly when there is a group notification. Players who try to win D&D. Oh boy, yeah, I played with one of those before, and that's why I stopped playing D&D. Players with main character syndrome. Again, why I stopped playing. 40 years as a DM. Wow! And what I avoid are interrupting or talking over others, over-explainers, humorless glum, combatophiles. Combatophiles? I love rules lawyers, though. Having one at your table can save you hours of referencing and keep the others honest. I love that. 2 veteran creatives, a lawyer, and an enthusiastic noob comprise my perfect table. Addendum. My biggest red flag is when a player wants to PvP another party member or attempts to force another character's actions. Insta-boot. I find players who just spend all their time deliberately trying to ruin another player's fun really grating. I once had a player who kept trying to interject and tell me why someone wasn't allowed to do that, or else would outright attack another member of the party. He also had a lot of other red flags listed here, not showing his character sheet, being very cagey with his dice rolls, and only ever failing a roll when it would dick over another player, rules lawyering, etc. Well, he didn't last very long in our game. Yes, good DM. Now, normally we would skip ones like these, but honestly, somebody who says, and I quote, "Can I roll to struggle snuggle her?" Yeah, that's always a giant red flag, and more so, reason to not only call that person's parents or spouse, maybe the local authorities, and never let them around you again, because that person is clearly not in their right mind at all. I have a player that consistently wants to utilize his divine tool. He's a half-orc war domain cleric and wants to spread his orcish seed with any female NPCs. I haven't given him any chance for his fantasy and have told him in no uncertain terms that it will not ever happen at my table. Yet he still tries, and it sounds to me like that cleric's divine tool needs to meet with a case of divine syphilis. Roll for STD. Recently found a new red flag where one player at the table spent the session trying to tell other players what their characters should be doing. They would try to justify it by saying, it's what their character would do, or argue the PC didn't agree. Never experienced another PC trying to railroad the party like they are controlling a whole team in a video game. Maybe a case of main character syndrome? Player who missed session 0. So I decided to homebrew a bit to create my character. Hope that's okay. As a DM, my response would be, so I decided to write you out of the campaign since you didn't show up for session 0. Hope that's okay. Was pretty surprised that it wasn't closer to the top, but my number 1 red flag is players who either constantly cancel at the last moment, day of, are extremely late with no communication, like hour plus kind of thing, or the ones that just completely no-show. Honorable mentions include being on their phone at the table all the time, being surprised that the turn order has somehow found its way back to them, and have no idea what they want to do, and being rude or dismissive to other players at the table. Players who define their character in ways that result in problems for the party. All my play is with friends, but once one of the players brought a friend who was staying with him who also played D&D to the game. The friend made a character who I didn't know he was a wizard and cast fireball on the party and monsters together without meaning to, used cantrips like thaumaturgy without telling the other players to mislead them or get them on the wrong track, and so forth. No new player should come into a game with their own agenda. They should be looking to fit in with a minimum of friction, let alone an intentionally disruptive agenda. My red flags are: when the player doesn't want you to check their sheet. We had a couple of those. If the player complains about using a dice roller instead of their own dice. When the players don't communicate with you honestly, that's a big one. This has happened before because I was dumb and didn't stop it when I found out. If one of your players tells you, yeah, so-and-so said if I ever wanted you to approve of something, I just have to avoid the whole truth. What in God's name? So you bluntly just admitted to no, get out. Players who don't bother to learn their abilities. I have a world to run and multiple people to corral. I'm not learning your abilities for you. Queries are totally fine, but if after 5 sessions you don't know how rage, concentration, or sneak attack works, then I'm not going to help you. Just know what your character is designed to do, please. Excuse me, can I play this character from Critical Role? This is right in line with the related statement, you're not doing that like MrRipper, to which I say, can you play a character as well as their player on Critical Role plays them? Then I don't have to be like Matt Mercer, and no, you may not play that character. After just finishing describing an item in a store, a level 1 PC says, I steal it. I would like to introduce you to the town god. Oh, whoa, what was me? Wowie, there's consequences to my actions? Players who think it's a video game or only play video games. This is mainly just an issue when paired with the trait of, my character is chaotic neutral, so I can do anything! And if that game is Skyrim or something you can break. Usually these players end up not taking the game seriously, and while one PC is trying to have a meaningful conversation with an NPC, they are trying to punch or rob guards to see what happens. It's a thing of them thinking this is a game to break and not a realistic simulator. Any player who writes a backstory that is, they were a level 20 character, had to take a break for some reason, and are now just getting back in at level 1, but knows all this about magic and monsters. One of our crew here would like to counter this one. I did exactly this with one of my characters, Delkesh, but I did it to help the DM. He hadn't DM'd a game in 5 years and was new to 5th edition. Plus, we were going to have a party full of people new to D&D, so I agreed to run Delkesh again. But this time as an old man who had been a king and stuff and had a bunch of experience, but was now taking up adventuring again after a long time away from it. The main difference is I didn't actually tell anyone my character was a former king and whatnot, until a few sessions in, and even then, it was hush-hush and only used in need-to-know situations. The idea was that he was supposed to have been dead, so he didn't flaunt his former status unless he absolutely needed to, and even used a pseudonym to obfuscate his identity. And let me tell you, the big reveal for the party when he finally let them all know who he was a sweet moment. Ooh, this one's good. Arguing and begging. It's what my character would do. Playing from player knowledge and not character knowledge consistently. That's what we like to call metagaming. As another player, players need to read their sheet. Had a lot of that, and everybody, read your character sheets. Hey, everybody, Brian Von VA back at it again to see how y'all are today. Make sure to leave a like, to subscribe, to ring that bell to get notified whenever we post or when we go live. And if you have a story that you'd like to share with us, you can do so on r/MrRipper or do so in the comments below. We are always reading the comments. If it's relevant to the video, you get brownie points. Please try to make sure it is, but even if it's not, do leave a comment anyway, because we like to gather a pool of those puppies, and you guys and gals have tons of stories. We want to hear them all. And as always, you can come say hi to me, Brian Von VA, over on Twitch or YouTube, where I make videos and stream a lot. Lastly, as always, I try to end things on either a positive or optimistic, realistic note, and today is no different. I just kind of wanted to say thank you. I've been meeting a lot more fans lately of MrRipper. I met one in person a while ago. I've met tons on my stream now. I know I have a lot of you out there that love my stuff, and you guys love the work that I do here on MrRipper. And when you come over to my stream, everyone's like, whoa, you're so different. You're not who I picture you'd be. You're much more friendly. You're actually real. And yeah, I am. And I want you guys and gals to know that you're all welcome there and that you make my day just by stopping in. I had one guy come in and say, I didn't want to make things awkward for you by saying, hey, I'm a MrRipper fan. I'm like, no, dude, make it awkward. It's fine. First meetings are meant to be crazy, goofy, awkward, and laughable because that's who we are as humans. And it's just, it makes me happy to know that I've helped influence so many of you to have a beautiful imagination, to have fun, to feel happy again. So thank you all for that. And I love all of you for it. So please stay happy, stay healthy, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.